Merci François, and good evening. I'm Maxime Bernier, Member of Parliament from Beauce, and I'm a proud father of two daughters, Charlotte and Megan. And I'm a conservative who believes in individual freedom and personal responsibility. During this campaign, I presented all the reforms that are in line with our principle: individual freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. And I'm one of the only candidates who want to abolish the cartel of supply management for Canadian consumers. I want also to get rid of corporate welfare. I think it's unfair for small business owners. So we'll have a chance to discuss that with you tonight, and I appreciate that you are here. Thank you for giving us this opportunity, and enjoy your evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Scheer. I'm the Member of Parliament for Regina Capel. I'm the father of 5 children. At 32 years old, I was the youngest Speaker of the House of Commons in Canadian history. I was born in Ottawa and now live on the wonderful prairies. I moved to the prairies because of our wonderful winters, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you on this beautiful January day. When people ask me why I'm running, I tell them it's very simple. I'm motivated by one clear. That is, I cannot let Justin Trudeau do to my children the same thing that his father did to my generation. Leave us with a legacy of believable debt. I'm very proud to have the support of members of Parliament on our team from every single province that we hold seats in, and I look forward to chatting more with you about my vision for the Conservative Party for the future. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Saxton from North Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm a businessman. I have over 30 years experience, mostly in the private sector and mostly in the finance industry. I've worked for 2 of the world's largest banks. At the age of 33, I was appointed Senior Vice President of HSBC in Singapore. I've worked in 5 different countries. I've also had the opportunity to serve our country as Member of Parliament for North Vancouver for 7 years. And during that time, Prime Minister Harper appointed me as Parliamentary Secretary to the Treasury Board and also to Finance. So I had the great opportunity to work with Jim Flaherty and also with Joe Oliver. I was part of Joe's team that helped to balance the budget. That was only 2 years ago, can you believe it? We had a balanced budget, and I'm ready to do it again. And the most important issue in the next election is going to be the economy and jobs. We need a leader who understands how to grow the economy and how to create jobs. I'm that leader. Please visit my website, andrewsaxton.ca. Merci beaucoup.
Good evening, my name is Stephen Blaney. I wear an Irish name, but my mother tongue is French. And I must tell you how impressed I was Tuesday with all my colleagues doing an outstanding job at speaking French. Even Deepak, even Deepak tried his best, and he deserved to saluer Kellie. Kellie, it's good to see you. It was great to work with you, with Stephen Harper, and all my colleagues here, and hello again as well to my colleagues. My campaign is based on stability, security, and prosperity. It's important to talk about the economy, but managing a country is not just about the economy. So I'm willing to have a great discussion, and I'm proud to be a member of the Conservative Party of Canada. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michael Chong, and I'm from Fergus, Ontario. My wife, Carrie, and I live on a farm with our 3 young children, William, Alistair, and Cameron. And I'm a Conservative Member of Parliament who's been 5 times re-elected, and my riding includes parts of the Greater Toronto Area. I'm the kid of immigrant parents. My father was a Chinese immigrant who immigrated from Hong Kong in 1952, and he immigrated to the Peg, right here in Winnipeg. And my mother was a Dutch immigrant, and she came here in the 1960s. Before entering politics, I worked in the private sector for 10 years in management, and I proudly served the constituents of Wellington Halton Hills. I'm in this leadership race because I want to build a much bigger Conservative Party. A party that is not focused on issues that divide us, but on a robust economic agenda that includes Canadians of all races, religions, and creeds. And I'll finish by saying this. À nos amis dans la communauté franco-manitobaine, la communauté francophone, comme chef, Je crois dans le fait français en Amérique du Nord. Je vais défendre les droits des francophones, des franco-manitobains ici à Manitoba et partout au Canada. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rod. My name is Lisa Raitt. I represent the riding of Milton, Ontario, but I grew up in Cape Breton Island. And after getting a bachelor degree in science, a master's in chemistry, a law degree from the, I know they're behind me going, wow, a law degree from Osgoode Hall, and then I trained in England as well. What I really ended up getting was a $100,000 student loan, and at the end of it, a government job, which is what all of us in Cape Breton aspire to get, except for the debt, a government job. I'm here because of that. I want to make sure that those who are living in a space where you may not have a great father's name or you may not be from a great geographical part of our country still have the same opportunity. More importantly tonight, we're picking a leader of our party. And the leader's going to have some very important obligations. First of all, you have to unite the party. Secondly, you're going to have to beat Trudeau in 2019. And finally, we're going to have to fix this economy because they've done such a terrible job. I can do all those three things.
I'm Pierre Lemieux. Il me fait un grand plaisir d'être ici parmi vous ce soir. And it is good to be back in the Winnipeg region. My dad was in the Air Force, so I spent some of my teen years in Port Ashland Prairie. And when I served in the Army, I was in Camp Barracks doing some technical inspections as well. I'm running in this leadership race because I believe that under my leadership, we can defeat the Liberals in 2019. And I believe also that you want a leader and Canadians want a Prime Minister who understands service. And so I offer to you and I offer to Canadians my 30 years of service to my family as a husband and as a father of 5 children, as a grandfather of 2 grandsons, 20 years in the military, which I joined at the age of 17, and 10 years as a Member of Parliament from 2006 right up until 2015. Together, we can defeat the Liberals in 2019. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
My name is Brad Trost. I'm the Member of Parliament from Saskatoon University. And first of all, let me congratulate you guys for finally getting rid of the New Democrats. It was in Ottawa, I'm probably best known for 2 things. First of all, I'm the only geophysicist in the House of Commons. Secondly, I'm the guy who's married to the pretty girl from, of all places, Mongolia. I also have a little 2-year-old daughter whose favorite words are dada, and we're beginning to realize she doesn't understand the difference between me on TV and FaceTime with Grandma and Grandpa. I think we can both talk back and forth. I'm running because I believe the Conservative Party needs to be a full spectrum, across the board Conservative Party like it has been, 100% Conservative. That means to win, and because it's the right thing, we need to have social conservatives, cultural, national security, and economic issues, all as part of our party's platform, and all solidly conservative. That's how we bring the different wings of our party together. That's how we win in this country from sea to sea.
Hi everybody, my name is Raitt Peterson. I'm from Vancouver, and I'm the son of an RCMP officer born in Ericsdale, Manitoba. I'm the grandson of an Icelandic immigrant who is a fisherman and a farmer, and a businessman. I have worked with capital markets for the last 30 years. Charlie Spiring is a good friend of mine here. I don't know whether that's good or bad. It's good. But I can tell you that I think the best Canadian leaders, and I know that Brad and Andrew would agree, are prairie men and women. We have a common sense of decency, we have a common sense of value, we have a common sense of all the core conservative values that everybody here shares. But I was very lucky. I went to Alberta, grew up in Drumheller, up in northern Alberta, then to Grand Prairie, and I'm a Peter Lougheed conservative. I believe in strongly defending our rights, I believe in strongly defending the provincial autonomy and the things that they have. And I was lucky enough to play hockey with the University of Alberta Golden Bears. We used to kick butt against the Bison, so don't hold against that. But I went to France to play hockey, et j'avais dit en France pendant 10 ans. Et je pense que c'est important de parler français clairement et sûrement, de débattre Justin Trudeau, and to defend the rights of everybody in Canada to economic freedom. My parents lost their house, my brother lost his job, my mother lost her dress shop in 1982. We're not going to let that happen again, and with your help and my leadership, we will stop it, and we will have a new Conservative majority government, including large parts of Quebec, in 2019. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Deepak Obhrai, the sweet Deepak Obhrai. I am the longest serving Conservative member of Parliament in the Congress. I have great pleasure of serving all of them, and many of you out here, Kellie and everybody else out there, and I say that we are an excellent bunch of candidates you have here. However, I'm talking about myself. Let me just talk about a little bit in history. 20 years in the Conservative movement in this country. We started with the Reform Party, which at that time, if all of you remember, was the Westward scheme. Slowly that Reform Party became the United Alliance, slowly it became the New Conservative Party, and we broadened the base. We had to broaden the base because we wanted to form the government. And in 2011, all of those efforts that I put and my colleagues put in broadening this base is what brought us to power. That is a formula that we need to carry on with to go back into power. We cannot hand it over to Justin Trudeau. He copied us, actually, to be very clear, by opening up his base. Let's go back, let's create the policies which I will tell you during the evening. Let's broaden this base and let's use that formula that took us back into government, that we are going back into government in 2019 of Mr. Trudeau on his way out of office. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you. Thank you. By the way, policies, epackage.com.
Thank you, Deepak. And now for what I do is the best part of the night, of course, is the questions that many of you have written. Thank you very much. Lots of great questions here from the crowd. So instead of going through a group of four, we're just going to go through three to try to even get more questions asked. I'm going to go back to the far side of the stage because we haven't heard much from them in a while with that massive intro that everyone put on us there. So I'm going to start with Max, and we're going to also pose the question to Andrew and the other Andrew, to Andrew's representative. So this is a timely question with the inauguration of a new U.S. president tomorrow, who's calling for countries to meet their NATO obligations. Do you think Canada should double its annual military spend in order to meet that NATO obligation? Max?
I think it is important to be part of the NATO and all these international organizations and pay our part also. So my goal would be to increase that budget and to be sure that in a midterm we'll be able to have 2% of the PEB that would be part of our budget for national defense. That's the goal. But the most important for me would be to balance the budget as soon as possible. I pledge that we will balance the budget the second year of the mandate, and like that we'll be able to lower taxes to every Canadian. So to be responsible, we must balance the budget, we must lower taxes, but also we must be able to give you the opportunity to create wealth and jobs in this country. So the way to do that, I think the first budget must be focused on private sector investment, and like that, you are the one who create wealth and growth, and it is not with spending that will achieve that. So for me, the first budget must be a private sector investment budget, and with lower taxes, ending the capital gains tax in Canada, having a corporate tax rate for corporation at 10% instead of 15%. So that will help, and after that, we'll create wealth and growth, and we'll be able to put the money for our defense. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
We absolutely have to do our part. If Canada is going to be taken seriously around the world, we have to be willing to back up our words with actions. And I was so disappointed. In fact, I was so embarrassed when just a few months after the Liberals pulled our jets out of the fight against ISIS, Our Foreign Affairs Minister, Stéphane Dion, went around lecturing European countries that they had to do more against the fight against ISIS. That's embarrassing to me as a Canadian and as a member of Parliament. I absolutely do believe in the goal of a 2% commitment on GDP. We can do procurement smarter. There's a lot of waste that goes on in Ottawa. There's a lot of waste that goes on in the Department of National Defence as well. We need to make sure that our men and women who put their lives on the line have the tools they need. We need to depoliticize procurement and not have these short-term cycles where every election, things like jets and helicopters are a political hot potato. We need to have a long-term procurement strategy to keep costs low. We could spend money just to hit the 2% target and not get anything for it, but if you're part of the pun, we can get a lot more bang for our buck if we do procurement smarter. Thanks.
Canada is known for a country that doesn't just talk about freedom and liberty and democracy. We're a country that actually goes to help other people around the world that are suffering from tyranny and from persecution. And we do have a responsibility as a member of NATO and also as a responsibility as a member of the United Nations to help people around the world. But we also have to help our own veterans here in Canada as well. We need to do a better job of helping them heal when they come back to Canada, not just the physical injuries, but also the psychological and mental injuries as well. I think it's extremely important that we have more resources for our veterans when they come back home so that they can quickly get back to integration into the private sector and into private life. And that's something that I would do as Prime Minister of Canada, to look after our veterans. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you're actually, Stephen, you're going to get another question. And we're moving on to the next question. I think there's enough agreement amongst those three, so we're going to move on. So the next question, and this is going to be posed to Stephen, Michael, and Lisa. Is it fair for countries like Canada, with cold temperatures, vast distances, and a small population, to be saddled with the same carbon rules as small, densely populated countries that are warm? Go ahead, Stephen.
I believe it's important, to deal with the environment and with climate change. And Michael and I, we have a different view. I believe we have to be more wise. We have to make sure that the energy is flowing. And is it correct with your question? Am I on track with your question?
You're answering.
Okay. So the largest refinery in Quebec is in my riding, and we want to have access to clean energy, but also to ethnic oil that is coming from Alberta. We need to remove politicians and sticky finger, especially the little one, from technical process. I'm an engineer. There's nothing more safe, I would say, in the world than a pipeline to carry oil. And I'm saying with Mexican we need pipeline in this country, but we need much more than that. You may remember when I used this bundle. Well, this bundle is another source of energy, and it's a Canadian energy. It's nuclear. It creates jobs for First Nation right here in the prairies. It creates jobs in Ontario, and it provides cheap energy for our middle-end businesses. So we don't need more tax. I don't agree with Michael on more tax. I agree on investing more wisely, supporting our industry, and letting those safe pipelines, go through the market. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. First off, there are many northern countries like Canada, sparsely populated, that have achieved reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. Scandinavia is a good example of that. Their emissions are far lower than Canada, and many of them are major oil-producing countries like Norway. Norway, in fact, is a major oil producer and is about the size of the population. Alberta has a very similar climate and is very sparsely populated. So it is possible to achieve emissions reductions in a cold climate. The second point to make is that we as Conservatives believe in fulfilling our commitments. The commitments that the current Prime Minister made in the Paris Accord several months ago were Prime Minister Harper's greenhouse gas commitments. It was under the leadership of Prime Minister Stephen Harper, when Minister Gluckov was Minister of the Environment, that we announced a target of a reduction of 30% of greenhouse gas emissions below 2005 levels by 2030. Conservatives believe in delivering on our commitments. I've come forward with a real plan To reduce emissions in this country, it starts with one of the largest income tax cuts in Canadian history, an $18 billion federal income tax cut that will take effect in my first budget in the spring of 2020. It is based on a successful Western Canadian plan already in place. The plan in British Columbia, a small C Conservative government led by Premier Gordon Campbell in 2008, introduced a revenue-neutral carbon tax. And 9 years later, the results are in. Three things have happened. BC has reduced emissions compared to business-as-usual track. British Columbia has the lowest personal and corporate income taxes in Canada. And British Columbia has the fastest growing economy. It proves you can both reduce emissions and grow the economy.
Thanks, Rob. So the question is comparing Canada to the rest of the world, and I think that's where we always kind of lose our way. The reality is this, is that we judge ourselves by what's happening in the country right now. I was Minister of Natural Resources from 2008 until 2010, and I was able to see up close and personal the wonderful innovations that are happening in the green energy field, and they are there. And we should continue to fund them, and they make a lot of sense, and technology will lead our way to reducing emissions, which is one side of it. But the reality for Conservatives is this. You know, my kids are growing up in Ontario, and they're being taught in the school system how important it is to save the world and save our country and cut back on emissions. And these things are important to my children, so they become important to me. But I don't think we get to that place by having a carbon tax, because I don't believe that we would trust the government to actually spend money the way they should. So I think about JC and Billy. I want to help our planet to do better. I focus on where we are. As Stephen Harper famously said, and I heard it in cabinet many times, if you shut off everything in Canada, you shut it all down, nothing's moving. It's still such a small part of the total emissions in the world. We have to keep that in perspective, but on technology, we punch above our weight. Invest in technology and not the carbon tax.
Thank you. Okay, next grouping. I'm going to start with Pierre. This should be a fun one for you. How are you going to get us out of debt?
Yes, I would say that today's picture is fairly bleak. What do we have? We have high government spending, we have out-of-control debt, and we have taxes going up. And really nothing to show for all that, thanks to our tax and spend liberals. We must tackle our debt, and we tackle our debt by minimizing government expenditures. The government must mind its own bank account, because the bank account is both bankrolled by you, the taxpayers. So we must, first of all, minimize government spending. The second thing we do is we lower taxes on Canadians. Why? You will keep more of your hard-earned money. What will you do with that money? You will spend it in the economy. When you spend money in the economy, you are supporting our businesses, and our businesses will create new jobs. Third thing we do is lower taxes for businesses so that they can reinvest in their businesses, so that they can grow, so that they can weather hard times and create more jobs. When we have low taxes and job creation, we have a strong, healthy economy, we then pay down the debt. That would be my solution. Thank you.
Well, the first thing you do to pay down the debt is you grow the economy, because with a bigger economy, as any businessman knows, you have more money to pay for things like debt. So what are the first things that we do to grow the economy? Well, we reform the tax system. We make a simpler tax system, lower rates for everyone across the board, get rid of loopholes, simplify it. You do that for business, you do that for income tax, you get rid of taxes that effectively raise no revenue for the government, like the capital gains tax. Economists have shown you lose as much tax revenue as you gain. So you get rid of that. You get rid of ineffective and wasteful government spending on things like the CBC, which don't grow the economy. Lower regulations, free interprovincial trade, the list goes on. And of course, you make sure pipelines aren't held up by silly protesters. Thank you.
Tomorrow afternoon, at this time, we have a new American president. And maybe by next week at this time, corporate income tax in the US are going to go from 35 down to 15.
Does anybody here pay corporate tax, or do you work for a company that pays federal corporate tax? Put your hand up. Anybody here? Put it up higher so I can see it. Okay. In 2019, as Prime Minister, you're going to pay zero tax under my leadership. I'm going to eliminate corporate tax. Maxime wants to go to 10, I think a couple other people want to go to 9. I'm going to go to 0, and I'm going to tell you why. Donald Trump is going from 30 to 15, he's got no VAT, so it's the same. The trade barriers are going up. Our debt is piling up. Justin Trudeau has our debt going all the way out to the age of being 101, so we got to stop it. Ireland is doing it, the Baltic states are doing it, the Gulf countries are doing it. Under Rick Peterson-led majority Conservative government, corporate income tax goes to 0. There will be a $200 billion stimulus in the economy over the following 5 years. We will balance the budget in 2 years, and we will cut spending. How do I know we're going to do this? It's being done right now. Trump model is the same one that we're using, and my head of policy is Mark Mullins, who ran the Fraser Institute for 5 years. Under my leadership, there's zero corporate tax and there's economic growth. That's how we pay for the military and everything else that we need in our social services. Thank you.
Okay, now moving to the next grouping, it's going to start with Deepak, but it's also going to include Max and Andrew. Okay, the two Andrews are getting split up. Now, here we go. You'll enjoy this one, Deepak. What will you do with the CRTC in an era where all content is delivered through our mobile networks and most Canadians eventually start using US data plans? Deepak. CRTC.
Thank you. You know, folks, if you look at the elections of Donald Trump, and if you look at our areas, it was massively filled with US news. Everything was US. If we are going to eliminate CRTC, then our areas are going to be taken over by American media. We need Canadian content. We need Canadian news. We need Canadian. But the problem with CRTC is that it has become too big. It has become too powerful. It has started choosing winners and losers. CRTC should not be in a position to choose winners and losers. All CRTC has to do, and we need to trim it to such a way that only it regulars to ensure that our areas are open for Canadians, so Canadian businesses and Canadian productions can grow in this country. CRTC should not be the judge. So, ladies and gentlemen, I do not agree that we should remove CRTC, but I definitely agree that CRTC needs to be clipped of not choosing winners and losers and just ensuring Canadian values out there on our airways. Thank you.
So the CRTC has two important roles. The first one, regulation for the broadcast sector, and the second one for the telecom sector. For the telecom sector, I will abolish the CRTC. We don't need the CRTC. We need more competition in telecom. We need to open the door to foreign investment in Canada for having more competition, more choice for consumers. So that is important, and also the telecom corporation will be able to invest in Canada with better services. On the broadcast part, I think it is important to promote Canadian culture, Canadian content, but that must be the role of CBC, and that's why I want to transform CBC. I don't want to abolish CBC. I want CBC to promote our Canadian values, to also promote Canadian content, and not compete with the private sector, with CTV and all the others. So we will be sure that the CBC will be like PBS in the state, and they will have to raise money with their viewers, and yes, they will have a budget from the federal government, but will lower the budget. Instead of giving $1 billion to CBC every year, maybe the budget will go down as the time will pass, because they will have the responsibility to raise money with their viewers. I think that's the idea. About the Netflix tax, I don't believe in that. We are taxing the broadcast right now for promoting Canadian content. the way to do that is to abolish these taxes and at the same time giving the road to the CBC to promote Canadian values and Canadian content. Thank you.
Canadians pay some of the highest cell phone bills in the world. There are countries in Africa, the Middle East, all over the world that have cheaper data and voice plans than Canadians do. That is unacceptable in 2017. I believe we need more competition and more choice. I'm not afraid of our Canadian carriers facing more competition from around the world. I believe in them. I know they can do it. We need to open up the Canadian sector to enhance competition. When it comes to the broadcasting side, I don't know why we have a bunch of people in Ottawa deciding what it's safe for you to watch on TV. I believe in individual liberty and personal choice, and I don't want some CRTC commissioner telling me I can't watch US college football because it might make me less of a Canadian. I believe each and every one of you to make that decision for yourself.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to our next group, Andrew, Stephen, and Michael. The question is, what are your plans or ideas for reforming relations with our First Nations communities?
Coming from British Columbia, this is a very, very important question. I have two First Nations in my riding of North Vancouver, and I've seen firsthand the issues facing First Nations. Putting more money, throwing more money at the problem is not the answer. We need to help First Nations get up on their own 2 feet so that they can work for themselves, that they can be prosperous. We have a First Nation in British Columbia, the Osoyoos Band, which is extremely successful. 100% of their people have employment because they have a chief who believes in free enterprise. He believes in business. He's got his own wine in that particular band. They are self-sufficient, and I think that is the most important for them. We've lost too many generations of First Nations to poverty, and we have to change that by helping them to get out of that rut so that they can create jobs and be self-sufficient themselves. And we can do that, but first we have to make changes to the Indian Act because it's patriotistic and it needs to be changed so that we can help First Nations. Thank you.
Secretary for Indian Affairs when I got elected in 2006, and we sat together on the Indian Affairs Committee, and you did a great job. I was here before, I was working for Indian Affairs actually, and making sure that First Nation will have safe drinking water. And I witnessed some great projects in First Nation, but I witnessed also some great challenges. And in a community near Tsetsin, we've been through a series of suicides. And we are all concerned with the Aboriginal issues, and especially those assassinated and women that are disappearing. But we know the cause. When I was Minister of Public Safety, Commissioner Olson came to me and said, Stephen, it's domestic violence. The cause is domestic violence. And what is creating this? It's the system. It's the social package. It's the reserve. We need to dismantle the reserves because we don't want Canadians to be second-class citizens. We have to have the courage to engage this conversation, to deal fairly with First Nation. We're all Canadian, we're all equal, we should be all treated equally, but we have to have the courage to have a serious discussion and dismantle the reserve, make sure that individual native can own their house and can be responsible. I think the principle of responsibilization and also of accountability. If someone is earning $1 million a year and it's taxpayers who pay for it, we have the right to know and we have the right to say our word.
Thank you for the question. I think this is one of the great challenges facing our country. It's a shame that Aboriginal peoples in this country continue to live in third world conditions. We as Canadians live in a country, one of the richest countries in the world, and we all, as Canadians, regardless of party stripe, need to do a better job on this file. I think that starts, as Conservatives, by establishing a new relationship with Aboriginal peoples. That's why about 6 months ago I met with Harry Belgard, who's the chief of the Assembly of First Nations, to establish that relationship, to say, look, I want to get to know you, I want to have an open channel with you, we may not always agree on the issues, but at least we have a dialogue. That's why, when I visited Northern Alberta, I met with the Métis Settlement Council of Northern Alberta, because the Supreme Court has said Métis peoples are one of the 3 Aboriginal peoples in this country, and they have constitutional rights. I also believe we need to invest more money in education. I have 3 young children. They're grades 7, 4, and 2 in public school in Ontario, and I'm ashamed to say that the government of Ontario spends more on my 3 children than the federal government spends on 3 Aboriginal children in an on-reserve school. That's not fair, and that's got to change. And that's why Prime Minister Harper introduced the First Nations Education Act. He worked with Sean Atleo to not only put more money, but more transparency into First Nations education. Unfortunately, that deal fell apart, but those are the kinds of things that we need to do in order to improve outcomes in this country and in order to partner with Aboriginal peoples and do better for all of us.
Okay, this will be the moderator's first opportunity to go after a little bit of division here on the panel. So I'm going to call upon Stephen and Michael one more time. Michael, Stephen suggested that the Indian Act should be abolished. In fact, Andrew did as well. But we're gonna ask Stephen to be a representative of that side of the ledger. Do you think that is feasible? Do you disagree with Stephen on this point?
I don't think that should be a unilateral decision of any government or any prime minister or any politicians. I think if we're going to move to a new Indian Act or the abolishment of the Indian Act, we need to work hand in hand with Aboriginal peoples before we make decisions like that. I think that's critically important, because if we don't, we will not have the support of those some 650 reserves in this country. That support is vital. So it's not a question for me to answer, it's a question to be answered after we consult with First Peoples and after we get their consent to move in that direction.
Stephen.
I'm fine with consultation, but endless consultation that gives no result and just worsen the situation. So there's a limit, to talk. There's a time for action. And every time there's a native born in a reserve, we have a moral issue as Canadian because it's not given the same opportunity. I've talked of nuclear. Nuclear, actually, industry in the mining industry is the largest Canadian employer for First Nation. We can give them jobs, we can give them opportunity, but we need to make them accountable and to make them responsible. The Liberals, they just want to hide. They just want to throw more money, and they don't want to change the structure. We don't change the structure, it will be more of the same, and we'll be in the same place where we are today if we don't have the courage to address the real issue.
Thank you. We're going to let him.
Thank you very much, Ron. I just want to say that what's really important, I think, for First Nations is home ownership. Many of us in this room, we know the importance of home ownership, the pride of ownership. They don't have that on reserves. I think it's very important that we give them the opportunity also to have home ownership.
The other hand wants to signal in, but that grouping is limited to those 3. So I'll get you on the next round now. Okay, next 3 is Lisa, Pierre, and Brad. What is your position on the Israeli settlements and their current development?
Yeah, it's a good question. Mike Chong goes, good question. Even before I became a member of Parliament, I went to Israel. I grew up in Cape Breton, I'm a Roman Catholic, so Israel has an important part of history for me, and it's a source of my belief. I was able to go there in 2004. I was actually 5 months pregnant with my second son, Billy, and it was a very important trip for me. I got to see both sides of the argument, as you could say it, the dispute, the discussion, whatever word we want to say to what's happening there, conflict. We've got lots of euphemisms for it. I've been there twice since. I've been there as a Minister of Transport, and I've also been there as a Member of Parliament last year. I went with my husband Bruce. And all of these trips have just allowed me to understand the issue more and more. And I do stand with our government's position in the past. I do stand with Stephen Harper that we need to make sure that Israel is our friend. It is a source of democracy in a very troubled part of the world. And we need to be a good friend. Sometimes good friends tell friends what they should or shouldn't do. But from our point of view in Canada, I believe that our record shows that we have great support. We'll continue to give that support. And it is wholehearted. And it is rooted in the fact that we respect the rule of law and we respect democracy. And I have seen it myself. I feel it myself. I believe it myself. And that's where my point of view is.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you. I also had the opportunity to go to Israel. It was a very educational experience. When you're on the ground and you're talking with journalists, when you're being briefed by experts and you actually see for yourself the situation that exists, you realize first of all that it's very complicated. You realize it's very historical, and that there are a lot of details that have to be understood in order to find a solution. One of the things I was very proud of during our time in government was our stand regarding Israel, because a first responsibility of any government is to protect their citizens. And so I stand with Israel in its ability and its right to defend its citizens. I also believe, however, that a two-state solution is the solution that's always thrown out there, and it's the first place politicians go. We must have a two-state solution because it sounds good, and it sounds fair, and it sounds equitable. But I have not seen anything that convinces me that a two-state solution will actually work. It's a solution that's being imposed upon that region by powers outside that region, and there's no one that's buying into it within the region. And to give an example, we do not see Palestinian leaders today embracing a two-state solution, because to do so, they must acknowledge the right of Israel to exist where it is today, and that is unlikely. So solutions outside of a two-state solution must be found, and they must be found by the players themselves within that region with the support of Western countries and other key players, without us dictating to them what the solution is and what it is they must do to make us feel good. I stand with Israel in defending its citizens. Thank you.
Start off with a couple observations here. Like the rest of my colleagues up here, I was very proud when the people referenced under Prime Minister Harper that Canada was Israel's best friend in the world. Very proud of that. Second main observation here. It is not in the interest of the Palestinian political leadership to have a settlement, and that is a big problem. It is in the interest of the Palestinian people to have one, but not their political leadership. So that right now is really the crux of the issue right there. Agree with Pierre. I don't think we should on the outside criticize or dictate what the terms of the final solution was. So I, for one, am not calling for the Israeli government to start dismantling their settlements. If the Israeli government decides to do it, ultimately in a peaceful solution, that's their decision, that they'll be there, that they'll make within being directly responsible to their people.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay. The next three, we're going to start with Rick and Deepak and then over to Matt. In Canada, the price of cheese and dairy is quite high. And is it worth it to have those high prices in order to support a system that maintains that price? Go ahead, Rick.
Well, you know what? If you're running for the head of the Libertarian Party in Canada, that's an easy answer, isn't it? Right? If you're Economics 101 or you're a CEGEP in Quebec, it's very easy to be totally against supply management. And I'm a free market capitalist. I work in the financial markets. I have for 30 years. And I propose and I support people who are in the capital markets who are trying to break through barriers. But I lived in Europe for 10 years. And I'm going to tell you something. If we strip away everything that we have in terms of fair market here in Canada, and if you happen to think that our farmers are going to go and compete with Europeans and Americans on a level playing field, you are wrong. If you think that our dairy farmers, if you think that our producers of cattle and grain are going to compete when you strip away what is essentially right now
a marketing situation that is a stabilizer, there's two things that are going to happen. The 40% production that the U.S. Farm Bill subsidizes American farmers and dairy producers will still be intact. So what are you going to do against that? In the European community countries, the one thing that every leader of the European community, and I lived there 10 years, so I can tell you this, the one thing they fear is the farmers in the streets. You start stripping away the subsidies for farmers in the European community, and you will have an amazing solution. So my proposal to eliminate corporate income tax is going to help farmers be more productive. It's going to help them manage their business. And the second element that I outlined on Monday morning is my Maple Leaf account. I'm going to take the TFSA. We're going to double the amount you can contribute to $10,000. We're going to take the accrued limit up to $100,000, and you can invest in private equity. You can invest in farms, you can invest in agricultural business, and you can do it in a tax-sheltered environment. We need to take the TFSA from a savings account to an investment account. So let's take away the corporate tax, let the farmers thrive, and let's let Canadians put money to back Canada's entrepreneurs. Thank you.
I travel around the world and I see the negotiations take place, and I see how other countries want to come to our market because they find this a lucrative market. But I'll tell you what, straightforward and simple. I do not want to introduce any policies that will harm farmers. Farmers are our pride. They earn, they are out there working, feeding their family. They must be our pride. When we dismantled the Canadian wheat board, the idea was that farmers would access the world market